Capitol Hill has been crawling with Canadians today. Canada's ambassador and other officials are lobbying U.S. lawmakers in an effort to avert Donald Trump's threatened tariffs. A live look at the White House here. The CBC's Katie Simpson is there, and she has more on what's been dubbed Canada Day, an annual event that has suddenly taken on a new urgency.
This is what diplomatic engagement looks like. Canadian officials organizing a lunch in one of the busiest office buildings on Capitol Hill, inviting in staffers and American lawmakers, trying to share the anti-tariff message really at any level they can. Canada's ambassador, Kirsten Hillman, saying that even though Donald Trump has threatened to impose tariffs on Canada, to go ahead with those tariffs on March 4th as planned, that there are some positive signs for the White House that the things Canada is doing to try to get out of those tariffs, the improvements to the border, the cracking down on the illegal drug trade, that it is starting to resonate in Washington.
So there's a lot that is being achieved. And we are getting positive feedback on that. That is what I'm hearing. And I get asked the question, will it be enough? There's one person who can answer that question. But what I do believe Canadians can feel confident is that we are taking these requests very seriously. We are delivering important results, and that is being well received.
Some lawmakers did stop by this event, but the engagement will actually take place beyond these walls right here. A number of different diplomats, as well as Canadian members of parliament, they have a long list of meetings with influential Americans as they try to get that message across really at any level they can. Now, some lawmakers did stop by the lunch, and they were open to Canada's message, really welcoming it.
Got a couple little differences, but it's a sheet with a few wrinkles. So we're going to iron those out, and we're going to move forward, because Americans, at the end of the day, absolutely love Canadians, and I think vice versa.
We are forces against the evil around the world, and we've stood together for more than 7 decades that way, and I expect us to continue to.
Donald Trump has threatened 25% tariffs on all Canadian goods, as well as 10% tariffs on Canadian energy, unless those changes to the northern border are put in place to his liking. But there are more deadlines on the horizon. March 12th, possible steel and aluminum tariffs. Then there's possible auto tariffs. And then there's possible big picture trade irritant tariffs. There are so many different deadlines that the Trump administration is looking at. The bigger picture issue here is how do Canadian officials find a way to get out of the cycle of threat and deadline. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
But in the meantime, let's speak with someone who served as a consul general for Canada before becoming a senator. Pamela Wallin was the government's representative in New York City, serving a 4-year term, and she joins me now from Toronto. Senator, appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
Hi, Andrew. Great.
So as a former diplomat, what kind of influence do consuls general have on Capitol Hill on a day such as this, in a moment such as this? I mean, what do you make of it all?
Well, it's a very difficult environment at the best of times, and particularly just post an election with all of the level of activity that the president's engaged in, whether it's DOGE or the negotiations over the reconciliation on the budget. These are very busy times. And so it's always a mixed message, if you will. You don't want to be in their line of fire, but you want to be in their line of vision. So that's a very hard balancing act. It's difficult to get people's attention when they're so busy. It's why you have to be working at this all the time. Now, when I was in New York, of course, it was after 9/11. So the focus was very much on the border and on security, which it is now as well, including the trade tariffs. But it's always on those issues when it comes to our relationship with the United States.
And speaking of the line of fire, it sure seems like Canada is in Donald Trump's line of fire. So what kind of role could these diplomats be playing in trying to convince other legislators in the United States to not implement these tariffs, which could come next week?
Well, I always remember the words of a historian, Bartlett Bretner, who said, Americans are benevolently ignorant about Canada, while Canadians are malevolently well informed about the U.S. So we have to start from that. We have to understand that they don't know all of the details about Canada. It's only when something happens that they start to focus on us. And the president has a very different view, although neither the Democrats nor the Republicans are free traders, and that's our lifeblood. So these issues would be arising one way or the other, but they're particularly strong and difficult now because we're talking about tariffs, which hurts our country financially and hurts their country financially, and so would any kind of retaliation. But if you always remind yourself that, countries don't really have friends, we have interests. And so we have often made the mistake of thinking that because we're neighbors and we're so close, and because generally the relationship has been, by and large, over the years, friendly, that somehow that is going to give us special status. But when it comes to hard, cold numbers and trade, and the president has been very clear about this as he was running through the campaign, that he was in favor of tariffs, that he wanted to repatriate a whole lot of American businesses and bring them back to his territory, then that means we need to be readying ourselves for this. Things we should be doing anyway. But now the time pressure is on, increasing our spending commitments on defense in the north, security on the border, the migration issues. These are all things that are in our own interest, but now the pressure is on because of the timing.
And I mean, it's interesting, Senator, that you mentioned that reference about that these are our interests. And Mark Carney last night, the Liberal leadership candidate, said along those lines, he said the United States is no longer a friend, it is a neighbor. And that was kind of sort of captured the spirit. Then we heard from Chrystia Freeland also talking about the threats, that Donald Trump is a threat to this country, a threat to the sovereignty. I mean, it's not just the tariffs. What do you make of this moment?
Yeah, I'm kind of saying it in a different context, I think. I mean, we will always, as individuals, be friends. We have a lot of common interests. We have family. People going across the border, they educate themselves, they holiday in the two countries. Those kinds of relationships will always be there. Look, I don't believe that the Americans are going to invade us and take us over militarily. This is just a wake-up call that when you are so dependent on one market for your trading, between 70 and 80% of our trade is with the U.S., then you have to manage that relationship 365 days a year. And when one candidate in the course of the election says, as Donald Trump did, I'm going to impose tariffs, we should actually believe him, and we should get ready for that, and we should be thinking about that. He's been talking about tariffs for 20 years. So, this is the point. We're going to have to look for allies in the political world there. Mm-hmm. I don't think most American parliamentarians want us to become the 51st state. I don't think they want to stop doing trade with us. But there is a very widely held view, and this came post 9/11, and also I think post the pandemic, where we all realized we were vulnerable. We were so dependent on foreign countries to supply things we needed, that he really sold that argument, which is we're going to patriate our businesses, we're going to become more self-sufficient. And I think we all should be thinking about that, as well as extending the markets and our possibilities of those people that we do business with. So you're not just dependent on one particular market. And so I think that's where we're at. And now we're starting to work on it. And we do have to do some things that I think will send signals to the Americans that we're prepared to step up and spend a little bit more on border security and national security. And, the tax issue, we've imposed a digital tax. This is something both Democrats and Republicans have said, don't do that. Don't try and tax American businesses on Canadian soil. So we've got to be careful of all the irritants that start to influence these relations. I
want to ask you, Senator, since you are a former diplomat, I want to ask you a little bit about, this is the second premier from Canada, Atlantic Canada, that has resigned in the last 5 days. Andrew Furey making that announcement earlier today. And this is what he had to say. Let's listen to this clip. This is what he had to say about Donald Trump.
I mean, it's clear, right? Like, the guy's cracked. I mean, maybe I can speak more freely now, but like he wakes up one morning and says something, and water occurs. Tomorrow it's going to be on tuna. Who knows? Like, it's just that's how erratic and confusing it is.
So what do you make of that? And he also said Donald Trump's a maniac. Just to kind of
look,
push,
I mean, there's no question that the behavior is unpredictable. The man has a notoriously short attention span, as we've seen in discussions about one day it's the 51st state and the next day it's Greenland. But it's also incumbent on us to figure out where all this stuff is coming from. He very much sees Fortress America. And he has been pretty clear about that over the years. He wants to bring everything home. He wants Europe to look after its own issues in its own bailiwick there, and he wants to repatriate businesses. So, I'll stick to more diplomatic language. I understand the premiers have been down trying to get a sense of this and have met with, I think, behavior that, because the focus changes it, depending on what's in front of him. But I don't think we should ever think that these issues for us are going away. They're not. He's there for 4 years, or that's the theory. And we have to be prepared to take him at his word. If somebody tells you who they are and what they believe in and what they're committed to, we should probably believe that and use that as an operating principle. So it doesn't matter. Look, the thing is that we often make the mistake of personalizing our foreign policy, that we want to like the guy, the woman that's in office in the other country, and then we think we're going to get along. It actually, in the end, doesn't matter whether you love Donald Trump or hate Donald Trump or love Joe Biden or hate Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. The thing is, it's understanding who they are, what their interests are, and us as the smaller partner in this relationship needs to be thinking about what problems we might be an answer to. I know when we went through these discussions post 9/11, when the Americans at that time really wanted to shut down the northern border, not the southern border, because they were worried about people coming across it. We had to slowly but surely go to governors and politicians in other states and say, look, you understand that you get 40% of your, fill in the blank, whatever it was that we were trading with them, paper or food or energy, oil, all of those things. And there is no replacement for that. So we need to work on that so that you can be happier and we can be happier and we'll all be helping each other's economies, rather than saying, leaving the impression that we don't like you, so we're just not going to do businesses with you. We don't have that option either. They are our biggest, single, most important trading partner. So we need to manage this. Mm-hmm. No matter how chaotic it feels, it's in our own economic interest, it's in our own political interest, and so we have to figure out a way to do it.
Senator, appreciate your time. Thank you. That's Saskatchewan Senator and former envoy Pamela Wallin joining us from Toronto.